Hey everyone, and welcome to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Adriana and I want to thank you so much for coming by and giving my content a try. If you have not already, please go ahead and subscribe. That helps me so much. And also like this video, and if you think it will help somebody, do me a favor and share it as well. Now today's video, I'm going to be talking to you guys about my 7-week long, or my twins 7-week long NICU stay. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, before I get into it, I may have to pause the video because I have 3 under 3 and my son was over in the other room kind of grunting and carrying on. So if I have to stop, you know why. But like, look at this look, y'all. Look at the fit. It's just giving very much, I'm a stay-at-home mom, happily married, don't have to impress you guys. But I'm literally sitting in my daughter's play area by the window. I said I need to get this video out, and if I'm waiting on them to be on one accord to do so, it's never going to get out. So I figured, you know, let's just do what we can. My daughter, the twin A, is literally probably like 5 feet away from me, sleeping in her little recliner kind of chair. Son's in the other room. Tyler just went to sleep. Husband's at work. So let's rock and roll. All right. So the very first thing I want to say is I am a mom who knew that her twins were going to stay in the NICU. I knew that. They told me that if they're going to be born before 34 weeks, they will have to spend time in the NICU. So that didn't take me by surprise. I think what made me more surprised and I wasn't prepared for was how freaking long they were going to be there. So let me try to fill you in a little bit. I gave birth at 33 weeks in 3 days because I had preeclampsia with severe features, which basically means I had high blood pressure. They had trouble controlling it. And actually, before I got to the hospital where I stayed for 2 weeks, I was at another hospital for 2 days where they prepared me for surgery there. But then they wanted to get a second opinion. So they sent me to another hospital that had a more developed and better, NICU. He did call and I didn't feel like watching the video over to figure out where I was at, but basically I was transported to a hospital and I stayed there in the antepartum for 2 weeks, and I was very much hoping that the twins would, be able to stay only like a couple days in the NICU. They were already really big babies. I think when I had them at 33, they were like over 5.5 pounds. So I was thinking that it was more so like weight, were they fragile, not the fact that they had to be feeders and growers and that my son had to have an emergency surgery. So going back to like the first stay, they actually gave me I want to call it like a steroid shot in my buttocks, which was supposed to help develop their lungs so that if they did come, that would be like the least of their worries about them breathing. That definitely seemed to work because they both were off of oxygen or the cannulas in their nose in less than a week. So that did work. I had a couple of friends that I had. One was a twin mom. Of course, they both were twin moms, but one had hers like a year ago. And I had one that her babies were just at like 4 pounds. So I'm like, oh, okay. As long as they meet the weight requirements and their lungs are good, they would be out and we could be home. That didn't happen. So when I had given birth to my son, because I had a C-section and I said, put me under, I knew I wasn't going to be able to see the babies for 24 hours, which wasn't a big deal. I know what the birthing experiences was, so I wasn't too pressed like that. I had to have them come out and me see them. When you have given C-sections, you already probably know you barely can't breathe. And I'm like, I was going to have to do that for potentially 2 hours. So I opted out and knocking me out. I didn't want to do the epidural because I didn't want to risk my blood pressure becoming super uncontrollable. So I was like, put me under with the anesthesia and I'll wake up in 24 hours and I'll see my babies. But of course that kind of took a turn because at about 9 o'clock maybe p.m. that same day I gave birth via C-section, I had to be rushed to the NICU because they couldn't tell if I had a blood clot, but I needed the nose cannulas, I needed some oxygen, and it was like really, really bad. I kept shaking like uncontrollably, like I wasn't cold, but I couldn't stop shaking. So I wouldn't say it was a seizure. They didn't say it was a seizure, but I was literally shaking like that. So that was very traumatic for me. And so when I finally got to see my babies, I broke down, of course. I was like, oh my goodness, because when you have NICU babies, you know how they look on TV. You may have had family and friends from a distance, but until you go through it yourself, the feeling is unmatched. Because I actually was giving breast milk to somebody in the NICU like a couple years ago for when I was pumping for my daughter, and I was like, oh, she's in the NICU. But until I was there and it was my babies and all of that stuff, it is I wouldn't wish that on anybody at all. So once I saw them, I kind of broke down a little bit and was very upset, like, about me having to, number one, give birth in the hospital, because I think I did put a couple videos where I was planning to have a natural birth. I knew a lot of stuff. I was reading books every single day. I was outside and just really mentally preparing for, the level of pain / pressure that I would experience going through that process, and was super devastated that I couldn't. It was out of my control. But before that did come, I did make that resolve that I would do what's best for everyone involved, not just being selfish and wanting to give birth at home. So they ended up, telling me I can go see the babies. And when I went to go see the babies, and I did see them at 10 o'clock at night, my husband took my daughter home because we had people helping us, but now he was more so like taking the kids home. So I remember going up there around like 10, stayed maybe for like an hour, and the nurse was like, go get some rest. You had a lot going on. And she's like, your babies are safe with me. So I was like, okay, but she was scaring me because she had like really red eyes and she looked like she could barely keep her eyes open. So I was asking her questions before I left, just to make sure, like, are you sure you're not going to fall asleep, drop the babies, or anything like that? Now, I didn't say that specifically, but I was asking questions as to why she was looking like that. Turns out she had allergies, and here in Pennsylvania, we had, like, in a lot of other areas, we had like that air pollution type thing that was going on, and it was affecting her, like the fires. And she said she used to live in Oregon or something, and the same thing would happen. So she was completely fine, completely aware, completely alert, because she's actually the nurse who saved my son's life. So I went to go to bed, and the following day, so 2 days now after my surgery, I get a call at 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's some doctor telling me that they would have to do an emergency surgery on my son, who was twin B, because his stomach had perforated. Now, this is not something I knew about. This is something that was completely missed. All ultrasounds and everything was, completely healthy. If anything, it was my daughter who they were concerned that potentially would had extra fluid in her kidneys. But I get a call and they're saying, his stomach have exploded. And I'm like, okay, so what happens? Is this something you guys see often? They say no. They actually would have to do the surgery, open him up to see what they could do. So that was nerve-wracking to me, because I really felt like if I don't do surgery, he would deteriorate, or I take the chance and they do surgery and potentially can save his life. And my husband was not there at the time. I don't think he answered because it was super early. So he either was in the bathroom or something where he didn't answer right away. So I had to make that decision. I was there all alone, and it took him, a while to get himself and my toddler. We already lived like 30 minutes away. So I was just going through it. I was like, not him. Like, I was just completely turned for a loop. Like, my daughter had already resolved, like, if she has that, that could be something greater. They were saying sometimes when babies have like fluid in their kidneys, it could be like Down syndrome. So again, I was emotionally going one way, and when they called me that day, I was like, wait, what? My son, what? How in the world did you miss that? I mean, I had ample, because when you're a twin mom or you're having twins, you have ample, ultrasounds. So I was just completely thrown, and that was like the longest day ever. We had some people who showed up, and I was like, I don't want to be rude, but I'm not trying to entertain anything. They called me at 6 o'clock. I don't think I could even see him till 4 or 5, and I'm like, this is an emergency bedside surgery. I'm just waiting for them to just tell me, like, there's nothing we can do. And I was just welling up with emotions, but still trying to be positive, but it was very hard. So with the surgery, what ended up happening was he could not eat for a week. He was unfortunately on fentanyl. He had Tylenol. And I mean, the look in my baby's eyes, it was like, he was like, Mom, help. he was super lethargic. They had to put like a little pick in his arm where they gave him nutrition, but yet he could not eat. His face blew up, and I may put it on my thumbnail so you guys can see how he looked, and it was just devastating. But after a week, they did like a leak study because they had stuff coming out of his body to drain his stomach, and they had something called a repulgal in his throat, which was just in the way of everything. Horrible. But my daughter, at the same time as being in the NICU, they were just working on her being a feeder and grower, which means trying to get her to mature enough to suck, swallow, breathe. And same thing with my son, but of course he couldn't do that with the repulgal in his mouth. So that alone, like after he was deemed to be better, and they were kind of going back and forth, like he would take a lot with his bottle, she would take some, then there would be days where like they barely took anything, but they had to keep a certain amount of feedings a day, which was like 8 or so, and they have to have a certain percentage, and they had to hold it, and then they give them the chance to be babies and basically eat when they want to eat. But it was like they kept increasing the volume even though they're not eating more, because they will put the rest of whatever they didn't bottle feed through their nose, not cannula, but their nose feeding tube. And so that was very frustrating, because I'm like, I don't want to leave one here, and I just don't want this to be as long as it was. Now, talking about some of the nurse and that staff, I didn't like every single nurse. I didn't like how everybody did what they did, but probably 90% of the nurses I did like. It was more so some of like the older ones that were like, I had 15 kids, I'm kind of rough around the edges, but I love the ones that were moms that recently had babies who could, just be a little bit more friendly. And I decided that this is how I was going to survive having kids in the NICU, having to leave them, was to make sure I basically talked to every single nurse that I could that came in contact with them. So every time, like every day for the first couple weeks, I would, come around 5. That allowed me to meet the nurse who was there, be in the beginning of the day, and then see the one who was going to be overnight. So I would stay and do like 1 or 2 of their care times, because they had them on 8 to 5 and 8, like they just like that, repeating like that. So I did like 1 or 2 of their care times and was able to really engage with the nurses. And it got to a point where if I told my husband like, I'm not feeling this nurse, he would let me stay. And I was great, of course, like mostly like on the weekends. But yeah, I was like, this is rough. They did have stuff to do for like my 2-year-old. There was TVs in the room, it was a really big hospital. I got free Starbucks. So it wasn't all bad, but it was very, very long. Because like I said, after the first 2 or 3 weeks, the rest of the weeks were just making sure that they can suck, swallow, breathe and get that concept. And then like the last week before my daughter was, discharged from the hospital, she was like showing really severe reflux, where they thought they were going to have to do they did have to do a leak study. They thought they were going to have to do like a surgical tube into her stomach and send her home with that, and then try to get that removed later. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I don't want that. She was doing so good. Now all of a sudden there's an issue. And then a couple of days before they kind of got to the place of eating and doing well, we knew they were going to come home, they get some type of cold. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? So we had to wear like the yellow suits, the mask, the gloves. It was just a whole thing. And so I'm super excited that I survived it, or we survived it. One thing I would say is that I would never want to go through that experience again. You hear my son? Yeah, I'm gonna get him in a minute. Don't worry, I'm not gonna abandon him. Sometimes he does this cry thing and then he goes back to sleep. But yeah, I would never wish that again. Looking back on it, it was not as bad as I thought it could be. I recently joined a NICU moms group, and I was like, there is no way I could have been a part of that NICU mom group being in the NICU, because there's so many different things and doctors do certain things differently that would have had me like, oh no, get my babies out this hospital. Let's go, wrap it up. But one thing I can say also that helped me, in addition to meeting the nurses and getting really friendly with them so they know, was actually there's 2 things. They had this thing called the angel eye, which allowed me to watch them, basically 24/7 when I'm not there. And a lot of times they did forget to put it back on there. So I'd be like, Hi, yes, can you put the camera back on my babies? I haven't seen them in 4 hours. I had to tell them because I was panicking, but they don't do it during care time. So temperature, diaper, feeding, they did not have them on there. So that was another thing. And then the other thing that made it easy was, I can't even remember. It was the angel eye, meeting the nurses. Staying over really did help. In like the last week, I feel like the nurses were kind of slacking a little bit. So I was like, I'm staying every single day. I'm making sure that they're trying for every single feeding with these babies. And we are going to be out of this hospital on time. So they only left 2 days apart. And actually, my son came home first. And then our daughter, and she probably would have came home a day earlier, but they changed her and put her on formula because that's what ended up happening. She needed something heavier than the breast milk because it was reflux, but now she's on breast milk and is doing completely fine. So I was super grateful, and overall it was a pretty decent experience based on what I see in like the NICU group, but I definitely would not wish that on anybody. And if you're watching this and you are going through this or whatever, one thing I can say is I do understand how frustrating this could be because I didn't realize how freaking annoying it was going to be until this happened like every single day. So I had to go get my son because clearly he was not going to go back to sleep. But one of the questions that drove me and my husband crazy was the consistent asking, how are the babies? When are they coming home? And it was like, I didn't know how to explain it to them that the NICU experience is very unpredictable. And technically one day they could be great. Then the next day they went backwards. Like, oh, they're doing great. They're feeding. Oh my goodness, that's fine. And now they're not. So for example, my daughter also got thrush. So she was doing really good. Bless you, Biggie. Doing good eating. And then like her mouth was burning. And then she stopped eating. And then they counted that against her. And you're like, oh my freaking goodness. So I just told people that, just tell us that you're thinking about us and allow us to give you updates, because asking us every single day is not it, because we don't want to say, yes, everything is good, to have to go, oh, sorry, no. Yes, they're doing good. Oh, sorry, something else happened. So it took a while. And then I had to use this kind of story to or metaphor, however you want to say, to break it down for people. And I'm like, think about it like this. When people go to hospice, right, they may say this person may have 3 to 4 weeks in hospice before they're out of here. So I said, same thing. They say, you could be out of here in 2 to 4 weeks. It's really depending on the babies. What are they going to do? Are they going to wake up one day and it just clicks? Or is it going to take them the whole 4 weeks, 2 weeks, 3 weeks to really get the concept? So I'm like, it's very unpredictable, and you can be positive, but it is hard to say. I mean, we hope that they come home soon when we want to, but it's just emotional. And for people to ask, it was kind of like, I don't think they could connect. But I think once I told people and gave them like that example, they're like, oh, okay. Because it's still like the person's soul basically chose when they're going to do it. We don't know. And we really didn't know if they were going to wake up one day. And then he was like barely eating because of his surgery. He was having 5 mLs, whatever, but he was doing great after a while. And his sister kind of like slacked on her feeding. So it was like, we expected her, twin A or baby girl, to do a lot better because she was more healthier from the beginning. But come to find out, big boy, even with the surgery, turned out leaving first and doing a lot better with his feeding. So if you know anybody who's going through that, just check on them and say, I hope everything is going well. Let me know when you're ready for to give me an update, or just wait for them to give you an update, because you really don't know. And also, when you have a longer stay, you have different groups of doctors who check on them and do different things. So one doctor says, oh, my daughter had a heart murmur. Oh, my son, his brain, or something, like they thought he had a blood clot or something like that, or his head looks a little bit more fuller, so let's do a scan. But again, one doctor says his head looks fine. The other doctor can't hear the murmur. It's just a lot. So you have to just, take a deep breath. If you know you're going to be going through it for the long haul, it's up to you. Use your judgment about joining like support groups, because a lot of times there's people who are super emotional, who are very negative, who may not really help you in your circumstance. I was able to still be positive and have support with just like the nurses in my small circle, but to have different people's perspective with different practices, different, laws in different states, I realized it wouldn't have been good for me. So if you do decide to do that, good luck to you. But if you feel like it's becoming negative or toxic, you're panicking, it's like fueling your postpartum, just use wisdom and discernment. And I wish you guys the best. Thank you so much for listening. And again, if you haven't already, please like, subscribe, and even share. And I will see you guys in the next video. See ya.